London is the capital of Great Britain and a global financial hub. We know it to be an historic city, and some may believe it'll be their future vacation destination due to its tourist attractions and modernity. But there was a time when most people would have rejected the idea of even visiting the city. Subsequently, during the 19th century, London was renowned to be the capital of the world's biggest empire on the planet. Despite that, it was one of the worst places to live in because of the immense noise and pollution caused by the Industrial Revolution. The London of the 1800s was quite different from what we see nowadays. The streets were full of mud and filth. A thick cloud of smog had settled over the city, polluting the air to the point it was hard to breathe, and the sewage was directly being dumped into the River Thames. Due to this extensive pollution, River Thames had become immensely notorious. On a hot summer day in 1858, politicians were forced to vacate their buildings due to the abhorring event that we now refer to as the Great Stink. And unfortunately for everyone, water companies also used the Thames River to bottle water and sell it. But in the midst of all this filth, how exactly did a used diaper lead to the death of 500 people and cause a local pandemic? And more importantly, how did beer save a building full of workers from it? We're about to find out in a bit. Before proceeding further, we'd like to advise our viewers to exercise their discretion, as this video would be covering different aspects related to widespread and quite dangerous diseases. Before we dive into the detailed account of the 1854 cholera epidemic, we must learn a little bit about the physiology and epidemiology of this transmissible disease. As elaborated by the Centre for Disease Control, or CDC, cholera is an acute diarrheal ailment that's caused by an intestinal infection resulting from toxigenic bacterium Vibrio cholerae serogroup 01 or 0139. Scientists have estimated that approximately 2.9 million cases and 95,000 deaths take place every year all over the world. This diarrheal infection is most often mild or even without any symptoms, but sometimes it may aggravate and even prove fatal if immediate measures are not taken to replace the lost fluids. Severe conditions of cholera lead to a very distressing situation. Cholera causes extreme dehydration in the affected patients. This condition is created due to the uncontrolled discharge of fluids from the body of the infected individual. Some people may say that the best treatment for cholera should be rehydration, although drinking lots of water will not miraculously cure the disease, because a cholera patient does not only lose large amounts of water but also electrolytes. Therefore, an appropriate rehydration plan should comprise a balanced quantity of water, sugar, and electrolytes. The rehydration solution recommended for cholera patients is quite similar to a sports drink or Pedialyte. The World Health Organization advises patients to use the new oral rehydration solution during the disease period. In severe cholera conditions, the affected persons may be requiring intravenous fluid replacement. Reports issued by the Centre for Disease Control show that with timely and prescribed treatment, less than 1% of cholera cases are proved to be fatal. All this became possible just because of modern scientific and technological advances. Let's look back and see what the leading medical minds were thinking about the disease in the early 1800s. For centuries, it's well known that diseases were caused as well as spread through the miasma, which is a fanciful word. It generally means an oppressive or unpleasant environment or atmosphere which emanates from or surrounds something. Usually, people believe miasma to be a concentration of bad vibes, and it used to be released from filthy and decaying items found in the surrounding areas. It resulted in disgusting smells, and foul odors led to the spread of disease. It would be quite funny to know that it is miasma theory due to which plague doctors used to wear their distinctive bird beak masks. They would fill the beak full with dried flowers, spices and herbs so that these countered the foul air. English sanitary reformers were greatly attracted to the belief in miasma, as it at least explained quite convincingly why epidemics used to break out so frequently in the areas inhabited by the poor masses, who mostly lived unwashed and in filthy environments. Later on, some other theories regarding how and why diseases spread were also propagated. Another theory, called the blood generation theory, was probably the least favoured, as there wasn't any scientific evidence to support it, and even at the time it seemed impossible for cholera to just appear in blood out of nowhere. Even the ones who believed the miasma theory didn't pay much heed to this one. For most scientists at that time, and even for us, the most reasonable explanation of the rapid spread of cholera was the germ theory. This theory proposes that extremely small organisms which could not be seen by human eyes were responsible for spreading the disease. This theory gained much popularity as a result of research conducted after the invention of the microscope in 1676. It was followed by the flabbergasting revelation regarding the existence of a very small world of organisms, even in a single droplet of water. Despite all these scientific advancements, by the 1800s there were a large number of people who still held fast to the conventional wisdom and fanciful theory of miasma, which contributed to the origin of diseases. Well, we still have to discuss the biggest development. Paul Dillon's series, Notorious London, A City Tour, has a detailed episode regarding the Great Stink of 1858. It amply highlighted the immense increase in the population of London in a century covering the period from 1715 to 1815. The population more than doubled, from 630,000 to 1.4 million. Subsequently, after the passage of just 35 years, that's the period just around the incident of the Great Stink, the population once again doubled and reached up to 3.2 million individuals. This kind of population explosion came with a unique set of challenges for the authorities. With this many people residing in a single city, the task of finding patient zero got much more difficult. In the affected area resided a renowned doctor named Jon Snow, whose proficiency in the field of epidemiology became London's saviour at that time. Dr. Jon Snow was a resident of York in England and born on 15th of March 1813. He was born to a coal miner who had 9 children. At the age of just 14 years, John left his school education and joined 3 different medical apprenticeships in Yorkshire. In 1831, while visiting coal miners, he had his first encounter with cholera. John specialized and proved to be the master anaesthetist throughout his career. He attained expertise to the extent that Queen Victoria herself entrusted John to administer chloroform during the birth of Prince Leopold and Princess Beatrice in 1853 and 1857, respectively. Most importantly, John was the exuberant proponent of germ theory. In 1850, as a co-founder, he laid the foundation of the London Epidemiological Society. During this period, Jon Snow researched another epidemic and published a very important paper that had been ignored for quite some time. In this research, he shed light on the fact that contaminated water was the transmission source of cholera in the city. His research was a game-changer in the then disease-struck population, as the cases were on the rise and too many had succumbed to death because of cholera. And more alarming was the fact that this epidemic affected the upper class more than the poor. Therefore, within a week, only people who were left in the area were either the poor or the dead. He mapped out all incidences of cholera by cross-referencing the homes suffering from the disease and the supply of contaminated water by the companies. On the basis of his research, Dr. John was able to trace the disease back to a well in Broadway Street. The number of cases originating from this area and the fact that the majority of the patients drew water from this well compelled him to consider the possibility that it could be the source of cholera spread, and soon enough, his suspicions were proven correct. Dr. John was convinced that the Broadway Street well had something to do with the outbreak, but on the contrary, there were 70 Broadway Street brewery workers who seemed to be immune to the disease. Exceptions were noticed in opposite directions as well, such as Susanna Eli and her niece. These 2 women lived quite some distance from the Broad Street pump, but both died due to cholera. While going to their estate, Jon Snow met Eli's son, who informed him that not only Eli had once lived in Broad Street, but also she developed a taste for the water from that particular pump, to the extent that a servant daily fetched water from there. John was a doctor, therefore he couldn't prove that miasma played no role in this outbreak. After all, at that time people of London were quite defensive of their superstitious beliefs. He did, however, manage to convince the authorities that this well might be the cause of this outbreak, and shutting it down could be the solution they needed to control the spread. He shared his conclusions and concerns with the local administration and had them remove the handle from the pump. This measure was aimed at preventing other people from collecting the water from the contaminated supply. Turns out this one precautionary step proved quite helpful, and the number of cholera cases began to fall steadily. But the million-dollar question remains: what had caused the outbreak of the disease initially? And in addition to that, how did the brewery workers evade the disease? Well, any guesses? Some thought the brewery workers were just lucky or simply had better immunity than others. It was quite peculiar. Not a single one of them fell victim to the disease. You might assume that they drank beer instead of the contaminated water. Perhaps it is the right answer, as the employees at the brewery didn't drink the contaminated water of the Broad Street hand pump, as they were all drinking beer. More specifically, we can say that they drank beer they were brewing, as the factory management gave troops a free allowance on the stuff. But the investigations continued further. Initially, it was ascertained that the water source or well could have been contaminated by sewage. A cursory inspection established that there existed no leakage in the brick lining of the well, and sewage was at a distance of about 10 feet as well as it was dug quite deep into the earth. Reverend Henry Whitehead had also responded to the epidemic outbreak. He consoled all those who suffered from the disease. In addition, he also joined Jon Snow on the medical committee of the General Board of Health, which was tasked to investigate the real causes for the epidemic. Whitehead dissented with the conclusions put forward by Jon Snow. He discussed the issue with the families of the victims 4 to 5 times for confirming the facts firsthand. Finally, although quite hesitantly, he concluded that the actual cause leading to the disease was water drawn from the hand pump of Broad Street. While reviewing the facts collected, he pointed out what might have been the patient zero. A young child, still being kept tidy by using diapers, had died of cholera symptoms just a few days immediately after the outbreak of disease on Broad Street. Whitehead decided to interview the mother of the deceased kid. She informed him that she used to wash the dirty diapers of the baby in a pail and dump the polluted water into the cesspit, which was located exactly opposite the Broad Street pump, which had a leakage in it. Whitehead and Jon Snow had found their culprit. Therefore, brewery employees managed to avoid the disease because of the reason that they didn't use the contaminated water. It's now a well-established fact that the outbreak of the epidemic was caused by an unexpected suspect. Perhaps after successful work of solving such a gigantic pandemic, Jon Snow must have lived a long, comfortable life. It may seem that doctors with such unprecedented success would get a resounding reputation. Dr. Jon, however, did not live long after to see how his research work revolutionized the field of epidemiology. He passed away just 4 years after the outbreak of cholera, but keeping in view his enormous contributions, Snow is known as the father of modern epidemiology. You'd be interested to know about the fate of beer. Well, human history is replete with excessive use of beer. Guys, we hope you enjoyed learning about the cholera epidemic. Do tell us in the comments if there are any cool facts you know about this historic incident. Do spare a few moments to like the video and also subscribe to our channel. See you all next time. Goodbye.